Today we're going to talk in detail about the first process of photosynthesis. So like we explained before, photosynthesis is the process of taking light energy and turning it into sugar. But it's a little bit more complicated than just that. So let's take a look at some of the molecules involved in photosynthesis. A chemical equation showing the process of photosynthesis is below. Like in all chemical equations, anything that you see before the arrow is called the reactants. These are the starting ingredients that you need in order to get the reaction going. Anything after the arrow is what we call the products. This is what is produced or created from the reaction. In this case, we also see something else added. If you take a look above the arrow, you'll see that light is placed there. Now, sometimes people put light before the arrow to show that light is a reactant of photosynthesis, and sometimes people put light above the arrow to say that this reaction has to take place in the presence of light. So just know that light is necessary for photosynthesis, and you can either place it before the arrow as a reactant or on top of the arrow. Carbon dioxide and water are the two reactants in photosynthesis, in addition to light. Carbon dioxide is written as CO2. This means that carbon dioxide contains one carbon atom and two oxygen atoms. In addition, we have 6 molecules of CO2, or 6 groupings of CO2. There's also water, whose chemical formula is H2O. This says that you have 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 atom of oxygen in each group. And we have 6 of these molecules, or 6 of these groups. Coming out of photosynthesis, we have glucose, a type of sugar. The chemical formula for glucose is C6H12O6, which means there are 6 carbons for every 12 hydrogens for every 6 oxygens. Now, glucose is a kind of sugar. Like most sugars, it ends in OSE. In addition, we mentioned before that sugars have twice as many hydrogens as they do carbon and oxygen. In addition to producing glucose, a sugar or a carbohydrate, photosynthesis also produces oxygen. Oxygen gas is made up of 2 atoms of oxygen bound together to form a molecule. And there are 6 of these molecules. So when you're writing the reaction for photosynthesis, just stop and think about what goes into a plant. First of all, there's light. All plants need light. In order to take care of a plant, we also need to water the plant. So we're going to add some water, H2O. Water goes into photosynthesis as well. And the last thing is carbon dioxide. We produce carbon dioxide and breathe it out, and that goes into a plant during photosynthesis. Plants use the water, carbon dioxide, and light to create sugars, like glucose. As long as you remember it has 6 carbons, like all sugars, it has twice the amount of hydrogens and the same amount of oxygens. So C6H12O6 is our formula for glucose, a type of sugar. And in addition, plants produce oxygen for us, and O2 is oxygen gas. After you've written out these basic ingredients and the products for photosynthesis, now we can balance this reaction. You're going to put a 6 in front of everything except glucose. Glucose already has enough 6s. Now this chemical reaction describes the overall process of photosynthesis, what goes in and what comes out of it. But photosynthesis is actually broken up into two parts. The two parts of photosynthesis are known as the light reactions and the dark reactions, also known as the Calvin cycle. The light reactions occur along the thylakoid membrane, while the dark reactions of the Calvin cycle occur in the stroma, or the liquid, of the chloroplast. Now, the goal of photosynthesis is to take carbon dioxide and put several of these carbon dioxide molecules together to create a sugar molecule. So the carbon in carbon dioxide is used to create the sugar. But in order to do this, there are two things that are going to be needed. First of all, in order to form these bonds between the carbon to create the 6-carbon sugar molecule, you're going to need energy. If you recall from earlier in the year, every time you create a bond, energy needs to go into the bond. In addition, it's also going to need electrons. So the energy and the electron molecule, that's going to be created in the light reactions. Our energy molecule is called ATP. NADPH is going to carry electrons. So ATP and NADPH will be produced in the light reactions and will be used in the dark reactions, or the Calvin cycle, to use the carbon in carbon dioxide and turn it into sugar. So first we're going to talk about the light reactions and how exactly the light reactions create ATP and NADPH. So let's focus on ATP to begin with. ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. This molecule contains one adenine, just like the nitrogen bases we discussed with DNA and RNA. It's the same type of adenine, a sugar, and 3 phosphate groups. That's where you get adenosine triphosphate. So you have an adenine, 3 phosphates, and it's connected through a sugar molecule. ATP contains a lot of energy between these phosphate bonds. And it's formed from a molecule called ADP, adenosine diphosphate. So it's basically the same exact thing without the extra phosphate. So ATP is the quickest source of energy in the cell. What happens is ADP, adenosine diphosphate, will have an extra phosphate group added to it to become ATP. And energy gets stored in this bond between the phosphates. ATP will then move to another area, like in the Calvin cycle, and it will break this bond between the phosphates and once more become ADP, releasing that energy to where it's needed. NADPH also gains an electron in a similar way. It's originally NADP+, the plus implies that it's missing a negative charge. So it's missing an electron. It then will take an electron because electrons are attracted to positives. When NADP plus gains an electron, the hydrogen will be attracted and will come along with it. So when we see NADPH, it actually has an extra electron because instead of a plus sign, we see the H for hydrogen.